She stopped for a late-night snack at a Chevron gas station and vanished into the Alabama night. Her car would be found days later, miles away, stained with blood. But what happened between 11:22 and 11:27 p.m. that night? No one has ever fully explained. It was late on a Wednesday, October 23, 2019. The streets of Auburn were quiet, a small college town settling into another humid southern night. Inside a modest apartment near the Southern Union State campus, Aniah Blanchard, 19 years old, was finishing a FaceTime call with her stepbrother. She laughed, said she'd grab something to eat before heading home, then hung up. It was routine, something she'd done hundreds of times before. Her friends remembered her as fearless but warm, a girl with quick wit and eyes that always seemed to smile before her lips did. She was majoring in education, wanted to work with children, and was known around town as Walt's Girl, the daughter of UFC fighter Walt Harris. That night, she slipped on a black jacket, tied back her curls, and drove off in her black 2017 Honda CR-V. She texted a friend, "I'm grabbing something real quick. Be home soon." It was 11:04 p.m. The Chevron on South College Street was a familiar stop, bright, open, the kind of place college kids felt safe pulling into at night. The cameras above the glass doors blinked red as she parked. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed over shelves of chips and bottled drinks. A security feed captured everything. At 11:22 p.m., Aniah walked in. She looked relaxed, scrolling on her phone, chatting briefly with the cashier. She grabbed a few snacks, smiled, and walked toward the counter. What she didn't notice, what no one noticed until it was too late, was the tall man who entered just seconds after her. He loitered near the back of the store, pretending to browse. Then he turned, watching her every move. Outside, the parking lot was almost empty. The glow of the gas pumps stretched into the dark highway. At 11:27 p.m., the camera caught Aniah stepping out the door. The man followed her. The footage ended there. 5 minutes later, her phone stopped transmitting location data. And for the first time, Aniah Blanchard, who never went anywhere without texting someone, went completely silent. By sunrise, her friends were calling. By noon, her parents were panicking. And by the next night, Auburn police had opened a missing persons case that would shake the entire state of Alabama. The footage from that Chevron gas station would soon become the center of everything. When detectives from the Auburn Police Department reviewed it the next morning, the room fell silent. There she was, Aniah Blanchard, walking through the automatic doors at 11:22 p.m. The timestamp flickered at the top corner. She looked calm, unaware that those would be the last recorded moments of her life. The officers watched as she placed her snacks on the counter, smiled, and exchanged a few words with the clerk. In the background, the camera picked up another figure entering the frame, a tall man in a dark hoodie, pacing near the refrigerators. He wasn't buying anything. He wasn't talking to anyone. He was watching her. The way he moved, aimless but deliberate, made everyone in that room uneasy. He drifted closer, pretending to check a drink cooler. At one point, he looked directly into the security camera, just for a second. Detective Carter would later describe that look as the kind that makes your skin crawl. When Aniah left the counter and pushed open the glass doors, he waited 3 seconds, then followed her out. Outside, under the harsh white light of the gas pumps, the camera caught the faint outline of 2 figures. A few seconds later, a shadow moved quickly near the driver's side of Aniah's car. The footage blurred. Then nothing. At 11:27 p.m., the timestamp froze as the door swung shut and the view turned empty again. The parking lot looked normal, calm, clean, and silent, as if nothing had happened. No screams, no sound, no witnesses, just the quiet hum of a gas station on an ordinary Alabama night. When police traced her phone, they found it had last pinged off Highway 147, heading north, a direction completely opposite from her apartment. After that, the signal vanished. By noon the next day, Her car was still missing. Her social media went dark. No bank activity. No phone calls. No trace. Detectives called her parents to confirm what they already feared. Her mother's voice cracked through the speakerphone. That's not like her. She'd never just disappear. Outside the station, crime scene tape fluttered in the wind. Reporters began to gather, and the image of that girl, walking casually through the sliding doors, started spreading across every screen in Alabama. Within 24 hours, Auburn had gone from a college town to the center of a mystery that would soon reach national news. But what no one knew yet was that the man in that footage had been there before. By sunrise, her roommate noticed the empty bed. Aniah's shoes were gone, her jacket too. But her phone charger was still on the nightstand. That wasn't like her. At first, they thought she'd stayed over at a friend's. Auburn was a small college town. Everyone knew everyone. But when the morning turned into afternoon and not a single message came through, worry began to grow into fear. Her best friend, Elena, called her over and over, straight to voicemail. Her mum, Angela, sent a text. "Baby, are you okay? Call me when you wake up." No reply. By 3 p.m., the messages had turned into desperate pleas. "Please, Aniah, just say you're all right." When the calls stopped ringing altogether, Angela's chest tightened. She called Walt Harris, Aniah's stepfather, who was training in Birmingham. He dropped everything and drove straight to Auburn, his UFC gym bag still in the trunk. By the time the family reached the police department, the sun had set again. Detectives listened carefully, but like every missing person report, they had to ask the hard questions. Does she ever stay out all night? Could she be with a friend? Any reason she might leave on her own? Angela's voice cracked. "No, she would have told us. She always tells me where she's going." The police entered her name into the database. Missing person, Aniah Haley Blanchard, age 19. The case went public within hours. That night, Walt posted on social media, his voice shaking in a video that quickly went viral. "If anyone's seen my daughter, please contact Auburn police. She's everything to us." By morning, the photo of a smiling young woman, brown curls, kind eyes, and a heart-shaped face, was everywhere. Gas stations, schools, churches. People across Alabama began sharing her image with the hashtag #FindAniah. Back at the Blanchard home, the family kept her phone line open, praying it might light up. But it never did. Friends formed search groups, walking through parks and creeks, calling her name into the night. Dogs picked up faint scents, but they always stopped near the highway. It was as if she'd simply been erased from the earth. Inside the police station, detectives pinned a map to the wall. One red marker, Chevron gas station, South College Street. Another, last phone ping, near Highway 147. Between them stretched 20 dark miles of back roads, woods, and silence. That's where the search began. And as the hours turned into days, everyone who loved Aniah realized something unthinkable. This wasn't just a missing person. Something far darker had happened on that October night in Auburn. For most fathers, fear is just a word, until the phone rings in the middle of the night. For Walt Harris, that call came from his wife, Angela, her voice trembling through tears. "She's gone, Walt. We can't find her." He was hours away in Birmingham, training for a fight. But within minutes, he was in his car, speeding down I-85 toward Auburn, the headlights cutting through the black Alabama night. He didn't speak. He didn't blink. Just drove. By the time he reached the police command post, the parking lot was already filled with volunteers, college students, neighbors, strangers, all holding flashlights, ready to search. Walt stepped out of his car, eyes red from the road, and asked the only question that mattered. "Where do we start?" Detectives briefed him on what little they knew. The last ping from her phone, the security footage, the black Honda CR-V still missing, no ransom calls, no clues, no reason, just silence. That night, a cold mist settled over the woods around Auburn. Search teams walked shoulder to shoulder through fields and drainage ditches. Helicopters hovered low, scanning the darkness with infrared lights. Dogs barked into the night, their handlers calling out Aniah's name. Nothing. The next morning, local news picked up the story. By noon, it was national. Every network carried her picture. Missing, 19-year-old college student, last seen at Chevron gas station. Walt stood before the cameras, hands shaking as he read from a statement written on crumpled paper. "Aniah, if you can hear this, we're coming for you, baby. We're not stopping until you're home." He broke down before he could finish. The footage aired across the country. A father's pain broadcast to millions. But behind the press conferences and the search grids, a deeper fear was growing. Detectives had reviewed the gas station video again, this time in slow motion, and noticed something they had missed. The man who followed her out wasn't a random stranger. He was someone with a record, someone dangerous. Meanwhile, Walt and Angela barely slept. They lived out of the police station, answering calls, checking tips that led nowhere. Every rumor, every sighting, they chased it. Every mile that passed without her voice on the other end of the line felt like another cut to the heart. At one point, during a late-night interview, a reporter asked Walt, "What keeps you going?" He paused, then said softly, "She's my little girl. You don't stop looking for your little girl." The crowd went quiet, and as the search widened beyond Auburn, the fear no one wanted to voice began to surface. That they weren't looking for a missing person anymore. They were looking for evidence. It was the fourth day of the search when the call came in. A black Honda CR-V, matching Aniah's description, had been spotted in an apartment complex parking lot in Montgomery, roughly 55 miles away from Auburn. Detectives arrived before sunrise. The complex was quiet. Rows of dull two-story brick buildings, the kind that all looked the same. The car sat crooked in a corner space, dust on the rear window, a layer of pine needles clinging to the roof. At first glance, it looked almost untouched, but when they got closer, everything changed. The passenger side door had a deep dent. The inside smelled faintly of bleach and metal. On the floorboard, officers found a small smear of what looked like blood, dark and dried. A forensic tech leaned in with a flashlight, and the silence around that car grew heavy. Within an hour, crime scene tape circled the lot. Residents watched from balconies as investigators in white suits swabbed the seats, photographed every inch, and collected fibers from the steering wheel. Then came the result that stopped everyone cold. The DNA matched Aniah Blanchard. It was no longer a missing person case. It was an abduction, possibly worse. At the command center, the air shifted. The word hope stopped being used so freely. Detectives knew what blood in that quantity usually meant. Still, no one said it out loud. Walt Harris was briefed privately. Witnesses said he sat for several minutes without speaking, just staring at the table in front of him. When he finally looked up, he said, "Then find who did this. Please, just find him." Investigators traced every movement around that car. Traffic cameras showed it had been parked there for at least 2 days. No one had touched it. No fingerprints matched the family or friends. But from a nearby store, one security camera captured a fleeting image. A tall man in dark clothes, walking away from the complex the same night the car appeared. He looked familiar. Too familiar. Detectives recognized him instantly, the same man from the Chevron footage. His name was Ibrahim Yazid, 30 years old, a drifter with a long history of violence. He'd been out on bond for kidnapping and attempted murder when Aniah vanished. That discovery turned the investigation into a manhunt. Photos of Yazid flooded the media. Police departments across Alabama were told to be on alert. But for the Blanchard family, that revelation wasn't relief. It was horror, because if Yazid had the car, where was Aniah? The search now stretched across counties, into woods, rivers, and abandoned lots. Helicopters circled over empty fields. Every hour felt like a race against time. And for the first time since it began, Even the detectives admitted quietly they were no longer searching for a girl who might be found alive. His name was Ibrahim Yazid, 30 years old, 6'2", 200 pounds, a man who had already seen the inside of more than one jail cell. His record stretched over a decade: assault, robbery, kidnapping, attempted murder. When detectives read it out loud in the Auburn command room, a chill went through the place. He shouldn't have been out on the streets at all. He was out on bond for another kidnapping when Aniah disappeared. The image from the Chevron security footage was now clear. That tall frame, the same black hoodie, the same restless pacing behind Aniah. And thanks to the DNA in her car, police had enough to issue a warrant for capital kidnapping. But Yazid had vanished. Detective Carter, who'd been on the case since day one, later said, "It's one thing to chase a ghost. It's another to chase a man who knows he's guilty and knows how to hide." Within 24 hours, his face was everywhere, on TV, on billboards, on every phone screen in Alabama. The FBI joined the hunt. Tips began pouring in, people claiming to have seen him at a bus station, a motel, a back road near Montgomery. Each lead sent officers sprinting, but every time they arrived, he was gone. Then came the witness. A man who'd been parked outside the Chevron that night told investigators he saw something strange. A woman arguing with a tall man near a black SUV. He couldn't see her face clearly, but the description matched Aniah. He said it looked like she was trying to close the door, but the man blocked it. Seconds later, the SUV drove off, fast. He didn't call police then. He said he wasn't sure what he saw. Now, that memory haunted him. The story broke nationally. Major outlets like CNN, ABC, and Fox ran the footage side by side with Yazid's mugshot. Public outrage exploded. How could someone with such a record be free? And more importantly, where was Aniah? As the manhunt widened, detectives learned that Yazid had connections reaching across state lines: Florida, Georgia, even Mississippi. He was used to disappearing. He knew how to live off the grid. And he'd done it before. Police surrounded bus stations, tracked credit cards, and followed phone pings through rural counties. But Yazid stayed one step ahead. For every door they knocked on, he'd already slipped out the back. Inside the Blanchard home, Walt and Angela watched the news in silence. Her face filled the screen next to his. Two photos that didn't belong together: a smiling college student and the man suspected of ending her life. Angela whispered, "If he took her, he's still out there." For the first time, the fear wasn't just about not knowing. It was about what they might eventually find. By the second week, Aniah's disappearance was no longer just a story from Auburn. It was national. Her photo hung on billboards from Atlanta to Baton Rouge, her name repeated in radio updates every hour. Across Alabama, people stopped what they were doing to share posts, to pray, to look. Churches held candlelight vigils. Local businesses printed her flyer on every door. In Montgomery, a group of college students walked through neighborhoods, handing out missing person leaflets until their feet blistered. Everyone wanted to believe she was still alive. Everyone wanted to believe this would end differently. At the command center, detectives coordinated with the FBI, U.S. Marshals, and state troopers. Helicopters swept over dense pine woods. K-9 teams tracked faint scents through creeks and abandoned sheds. Each night, officers returned covered in mud, exhausted, and empty-handed. Walt Harris barely slept. He spent his days riding with search crews, following every tip, and at night he'd go live on Instagram begging for help. "Please, keep her picture out there. Don't let people forget her face." His voice, once strong and booming in the octagon, now cracked under the weight of desperation. Each broadcast drew thousands of viewers, strangers from across the country who called him brother, dad, fighter. The governor offered a $105,000 reward for information. Leads began to pour in faster than they could process. A woman claimed she'd seen a girl matching Aniah's description at a gas station in Florida. Another swore she heard a scream on a rural road near Tuskegee. Every tip sent officers racing down back highways with flashing lights, and everyone ended the same way: nothing. In the media, pressure grew. Anchors asked how a violent felon like Yazid had been free in the first place. Reporters waited outside the courthouse, microphones ready, but police said little. The investigation was moving, quietly, carefully, but no one knew if they were running toward answers or just deeper into darkness. Meanwhile, inside the Blanchard home, silence filled every corner. Angela kept Aniah's bedroom exactly as she left it: makeup on the dresser, textbooks half open, a perfume bottle by the mirror. Every night before bed, she sat on her daughter's bed and whispered, "Come home, baby. Just come home." Outside, strangers left candles and teddy bears by the front steps. The neighborhood smelled faintly of wax and rain. And as another week passed with no sign, a subtle shift began to happen. People still searched, still hoped, but the energy changed. The flyers that once said "missing" now had a different word written in small, quiet letters beneath it: presumed. But then, on the morning of November 25th, a hunter in rural Shorter, Alabama, made a discovery that would end the search and break the hearts of everyone who had been praying for a miracle. It was a Monday morning, November 25th, 2019, when the call came through the radio. A hunter in Shorter, Alabama, about 30 miles east of Montgomery, had found what looked like human remains in a wooded area off County Road 2. Detectives were on scene within the hour. The woods were dense, tall pines and underbrush so thick the air itself felt heavy. Rain had fallen the night before, leaving the ground soft and slick. The hunter stood near the edge of a clearing, pale, trembling. He didn't need to say much. The look on his face said it all. The crime scene unit moved slowly, carefully marking every footprint, every leaf disturbed. A few yards in, under a fallen tree limb, they found her. The remains were badly decomposed, but the clothing, the jewelry, and the small black hair tie confirmed what no one wanted to believe. It was Aniah. The forest went quiet. No one spoke. Even the wind seemed to stop moving. Detective Carter radioed back to command, his voice barely above a whisper. "We found her." Word spread fast. Within minutes, the command center in Auburn went still. Officers who had worked the case for weeks stood frozen, some staring at the floor, others quietly crying. At the Blanchard home, the phone rang, and Angela collapsed before she could finish the sentence. Walt Harris stood beside her, his hands shaking, his jaw locked tight. He didn't cry at first. He just stared out the window for a long time, until finally whispering, "My baby's coming home, but not the way she should." That night, candles burned across the state. In Auburn, hundreds gathered outside the college chapel, holding photos and praying in silence. Some wore T-shirts with her smile printed across the front. Others brought flowers and teddy bears. The air was cold and damp, but no one left. Detectives worked the site through the night, collecting every fragment, every scrap of evidence. They found traces that would later help confirm Yazid's involvement, but the details were too painful for the public to hear. It was clear what had happened, even if no one dared say it out loud. The next morning, the coroner made it official. The remains found in Shorter belonged to 19-year-old Aniah Haley Blanchard. News stations across the country broke the story. Reporters spoke softly now, their usual rhythm gone. This was no longer a mystery. It was grief. In the days that followed, people in Auburn lined the streets as a black hearse passed by. Students, officers, and strangers held signs that read, "Rest easy, Aniah." The investigation had found its answer, but no one felt any peace. When the news broke that Aniah's remains had been found, Alabama seemed to stop breathing. But while the state grieved, investigators moved fast. The name that had haunted their case file for weeks, Ibrahim Yazid, was now their target. Within 48 hours, U.S. Marshals traced him to a motel in Pensacola, Florida. It was just after midnight when officers moved in. Yazid tried to run. He didn't get far. Pinned to the ground by SWAT officers, he screamed that he didn't do anything. But his clothes, his fingerprints, and the phone data told a different story. When they brought him back to Alabama, the streets outside the jail were lined with people holding signs, some reading "Justice for Aniah," others simply "No bail." Walt Harris stood among them, silent, his face expressionless under the streetlights. He didn't speak that night. He didn't have to. Detectives gathered every piece of evidence they could. The surveillance footage, the DNA in the car, the witness accounts, the cell tower pings that tracked Yazid's movements the night Aniah vanished. It all pointed in one direction. The district attorney of Lee County announced the charges: capital murder and kidnapping in the first degree. If convicted, Yazid would face the death penalty. Inside the courtroom, he sat stone-faced, no apology, no emotion. Reporters described the atmosphere as electric with anger. Family members filled the benches behind the prosecution table, clutching each other's hands as photos of Aniah flashed on the screen. Angela, her mother, said later, "It felt like seeing her all over again. The same pictures, the same smile, and that man just sat there, cold as ice." The trial dragged on, delayed by motions, hearings, and appeals. Each session forced the family to relive the worst night of their lives. But they came to everyone: Walt, Angela, and friends who refused to let her memory fade. Reporters outside the courthouse began calling it the case that changed Alabama. And they were right. Because this time, the outrage didn't stop at the verdict. It turned into action. Walt Harris, through tears, told a crowd gathered outside after a hearing, "This isn't just about punishment. This is about making sure no one else's child ends up in the hands of someone who never should have been free." Behind those words was more than grief. It was resolve. Out of the tragedy came a push for reform that would soon echo in the state capitol, sparking new laws and renewed conversations about justice. But for now, in that courtroom, as the man accused of killing his daughter was led away in handcuffs, Walt finally exhaled. Not relief, just exhaustion. The kind that comes when a nightmare has no real ending. The funeral was held on a grey November afternoon in Auburn. Cold rain fell over the church parking lot as people filed in: classmates, officers, neighbors, complete strangers. Inside, the air was thick with the quiet sound of sniffles and the low hum of organ music. At the front of the chapel stood a single photo of Aniah Blanchard, smiling in her graduation gown, her eyes bright with the kind of life no one expected to end at 19. White roses surrounded the frame. Her casket was simple, pale ivory, with her favorite bracelet resting on top, a small silver heart her mother had given her on her 16th birthday. Walt Harris sat in the front row, his hands clasped so tightly they turned white. He'd fought in cages before, taken punches that broke ribs, but nothing compared to this. Every time someone said her name, he flinched. Not from anger, but from love he couldn't protect anymore. Angela spoke softly at the podium, her voice trembling. She wasn't just my daughter, she was my peace. Every night she'd kiss me goodnight and say, "I love you, Mama." And now, all I want is one more of those nights. The crowd cried with her. Some bowed their heads. Others stared forward, frozen between disbelief and heartbreak. When the service ended, hundreds followed the hearse as it left the church. Along the streets of Auburn, people stood holding candles despite the drizzle. Children from the local school released white balloons into the cloudy sky. The wind carried them upward, a soft blur of color disappearing into the gray. At the cemetery, as the final prayer faded, Walt placed his hand on the casket and whispered something only he could hear. Reporters later wrote that he didn't cry, not until the first shovel of dirt hit the lid. Then he broke. His knees buckled, and his friends caught him before he fell. It was the sound of a man whose heart had finally given up pretending to be strong. After that day, Auburn changed. People who had never met Aniah spoke of her as if they had. Her picture stayed taped to gas station windows long after the tape yellowed. And even now, years later, every October, candles still appear at that same Chevron station, flickering quietly beneath the fluorescent lights, the way hope flickers when nothing else is left. Angela once said in an interview, "I still set a plate for her sometimes. It's how I remind myself she's not gone. She's just waiting somewhere better." And with that, the town of Auburn carried a wound that time could not erase. But out of that pain, something larger began to take shape, a law born from loss, and a promise that Aniah's story would never be in vain. In the months after Aniah's funeral, Auburn slowly returned to its rhythm. Classes resumed, football games went on, people tried to smile again. But for the Blanchard family, there was no return to normal. Every morning was a reminder of what had been stolen. And yet, through that pain, Angela and Walt decided one thing: Aniah's name would not fade. They met with lawmakers in Montgomery, sitting in offices lined with flags and framed photos. Angela brought her daughter's picture everywhere she went, holding it as she spoke to senators and representatives, her voice steady, her grief visible but controlled. "My daughter died because a violent man was out on bond," she said. "If this system can let that happen, then it's broken, and it needs to change." That meeting became the spark for what would be known as Aniah's Law. The proposal was simple but powerful: to give judges the authority to deny bail to individuals charged with violent crimes, people who posed a clear threat to the public. Until then, even repeat offenders with serious charges could walk free while awaiting trial, as Yazid had. Now, that loophole was closing. For 2 years, Angela and Walt attended every hearing, every vote, every press conference. They stood side by side with lawmakers, holding photos of Aniah and speaking about the night she never came home. The state listened. So did the nation. In 2021, Alabama's governor signed the bill into law. The room erupted in applause, but Angela just closed her eyes and whispered, "This one's for you, baby." Reporters captured the moment. A mother who had lost everything, standing in victory not for herself, but for others. The law soon became a model for other states considering similar measures. Judges now had the power to keep violent offenders behind bars before trial, protecting future victims who would never know how close they came to danger. Walt later said in an interview, "Aniah didn't die for nothing. Her story saved lives. If one person is spared what we went through, that's her legacy." Across Alabama, her name took on new meaning. Schools began offering scholarships in her honor. A mural of her smiling face was painted near the Auburn campus, surrounded by the words, "Light always wins." Each October, the community gathers there, candles flickering, prayers whispered, and stories shared about the young woman who inspired a law strong enough to protect the living. Aniah's Law didn't erase the pain, but it gave the pain purpose. And in a world that had taken everything from one family, it was the first sign that maybe, just maybe, justice still had a heartbeat. Time passed, but the questions never stopped. Why that night? Why that gas station? Did he follow her? Or was it just chance? A random crossing of two paths that should never have met? Investigators believe they know how it ended, but no one really knows what happened in those lost minutes between 11:22 and 11:27 p.m. The security footage gave them faces. The evidence gave them answers, but not peace. Sometimes, even in a solved case, what haunts the most are the moments that can't be explained. The silence inside the car, the final look on her face, the reason why no one heard her call for help. For Auburn, life moved on, but never the same. The Chevron where she vanished still stands. At night, students drive past it a little slower. Some leave flowers by the pumps, others stop for a moment of silence before heading home. They say you can still feel something there. Not fear, but presence. A quiet reminder that safety is never guaranteed and that evil often hides in plain sight. Every October, the town gathers under the chapel lights to light candles for Aniah. And each year, more people show up, not just to mourn, but to promise they'll keep her story alive. Because in America, when someone vanishes, the world keeps turning. But for the families, time freezes in place. Aniah's face still appears on posters, in classrooms, in news archives, a symbol of what happens when justice comes too late. And yet, her story became more than tragedy. It became change. It became law. It became the voice of every family still waiting for answers in the dark. "We can't bring her back," Angela once said, standing beside her daughter's mural. "But maybe, by telling her story, we can stop this from happening to someone else's child." So tonight, as the lights fade and the screen goes dark, remember her. Remember Aniah, the girl who just wanted to get home. And if her story moved you, help keep her memory alive. Like this video, share it, and subscribe to Vanished in America Story. Because every view, every share, and every voice helps bring light to the stories that still remain unsolved, and to the people who never made it home.